Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for another live broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on your number one network, Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. And we're going out on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio apps. We've got the TFR chat room at tfrlive.com/chat. And we're also going out on YouTube. So wherever you are, whenever you are, and however you're listening to the show, a big, huge, warm welcome from me, your host, Kev Baker, coming to you from the smart land within the heartland of Scotland. Yes. You know, I'm so proud of being in that smart city over here. And of course, I am proudly Scottish. And the long-time listeners will know my story. I grew up on the banks of Loch Ness, and from a very early age, the paranormal and the supernatural were everyday talking points. It was the norm. So growing up, I was steeped in all of these topics, especially coming from beside that world famous spot of Loch Ness and everything to do with the Loch Ness Monster. And I suppose, you know, when I look back on how I got here today, it was always going to happen. I was always going to end up talking about these subjects and getting into what I call the woo. And I love nothing more than sitting down with people who have got an equal enthusiasm for all these topics. We love to spend hours discussing things that probably will never get any closer to the answer to. I tell you what, it's damn good fun along the way, right? And from the paranormal to the supernatural to the cryptids and everything else in between. We're going to be covering that here today, and I am stoked to tell you that we've got a new guest on the show, and it was put together by a mutual friend, Charlie Robinson. Big shout out to him. We all know the instant connection me and Charlie made. Well, I can tell you in 5-10 minutes of speaking to today's guest, I'm feeling that same vibe. Oh, and are we going to have a conversation about all of the good stuff? Because today, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by Tony Merkel. Now, he is the host of the Confessionals podcast, and I urge you all to check out his work over at theconfessionalspodcast.com. He's got a YouTube channel as well. But get a load of this, because from a very young age, Tony Merkel was fascinated by all things strange and mysterious. Now, growing up in rural Pennsylvania afforded him a childhood spent playing in the woods, where mysteries only tend to deepen. From Bigfoot to extraterrestrials to, the Loch Ness Monster, Tony always wondered at the unexplained. And as an adult with the internet at his fingertips, Tony was able to further explore his lifelong fascination with the unexplained. And with an initial focus on Bigfoot, he sought out the Bigfoot community with podcasts like the Sasquatch Chronicles and local Facebook groups to learn more about that elusive creature. Now, throughout his search for truth, one thing became certain. He was not alone in this pursuit, and this is something that I'm sure all of us here already are resonating with, but it goes on. Because interest peaked and knowledge gained, Tony started his own Facebook group to connect with fellow Sasquatch researchers in his home state of Pennsylvania. Now, hoping to initially attract at least 50 members for good conversation, his group, which is called the Pennsylvania Sasquatch Research, or PSR, quickly grew to almost 1,000 members. Now, the group continues to grow its follower base and maintains a peaceful environment that allows all members to share ideas and experiences. Sounds very familiar, almost like the Kev Baker Show. And in 2016, Tony originally created the Confessionals on YouTube as a video platform where people could give voice to strange, extraordinary things that they experienced. And his YouTube channel attracted worldwide attention, which was followed by a phone call from a leading member of the cryptid community. Now, they saw value in Tony's endeavours and encouraged him to take his work to the next level. So after revamping his creation with eyewitness accounts, narrated stories, and expert guests, The Confessionals was officially reborn as a podcast. And together with his wife, Lindsay, who also grew up playing in the woods and reading books about strange anomalies like Bigfoot and the Bermuda Triangle, Tony produces The Confessionals in his own studio. And The Confessionals is now a podcast that is streamed on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. And ladies and gentlemen, he is here. He is live with us. There he is, supporting or sporting an absolutely fabulous beard as well. How you doing, brother? It's great to get you on the show, man.
Absolutely. I'm doing great. And yes, absolutely. Before we get any further, shout out to Charlie Robinson for hooking this up. He's been a great friend of mine and yours. And I hear he has an awesome podcast called Macroaggressions. I think people should check out. I listened to a few episodes in there. It's pretty good.
I was proudly his first guest. I popped his cherry. I was very gentle with him. You know, it was good fun. And yeah, Charlie is somebody who I get on once a month, and I love to pick his brain about what's going on in the world, because with all of that history that he's amassed as well with his book, The Octopus of Global Control, it gives him a unique perspective on some of the things going on today, Tony, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Charlie is a wealth of information. I can't tell you how much I learned from him just from hearing him talk on other people's interviews and stuff. By profession, full time, I'm a truck driver. And so I got a lot of time to listen to stuff, not a lot of time to read stuff, but I listen to a lot of his interviews and stuff, and I've learned so much. And, his podcast is pretty much just dropping bombs every episode. And I did listen to the one with you guys and stuff, and it was awesome. So, yeah, great stuff.
And Charlie, he really doesn't care. He says it as it is. He doesn't pull any punches, and I think that's another reason why I get on so well with him. But listen, dude, let me get to know you a little bit better, because that bio there, you know, you've probably heard that many times before, but tell us, how did you get into all of these topics, like the Bigfoot, everything that we're going to be talking about today? And I kind of call it the woo on here. And you're definitely somebody that's steeped in the woo. So how did you really fall into this, man?
Well, I would say, first off, I don't think I have ever heard that bio read back to me like that before a show, and it was awesome. My wife wrote that. She's a writer, and I was like, man, she really writes a lot better than I do. So shout out to my wife for that bio, making me sound awesome. But I just, when I was a kid, I grew up in very rural Pennsylvania. The town was called Kutztown, Pennsylvania Dutch small town. And I actually lived outside of town, probably about 6, 7, 8 miles outside of the small town. And it was a big trailer park in the middle of cornfields. I mean, we were country kids. I mean, we literally played in cornfields in the woods for fun because there's nothing else to do. And so we would go out and we just, let our imaginations run wild. And, sometimes we'd find ourselves, thinking, is are werewolves real? And we quickly came to the conclusion that no, that's impossible. But as an adult, I would say, maybe not. But but then we got on the topics of Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster, and with me and a couple of my friends made a pact that when we were adults, we were going to go and hunt down the Loch Ness monster. And we never made it out there yet, but maybe one day we will. But
you, Charlie Robinson, the History Channel. If anyone from the History Channel out there is listening, I've got a perfect show idea for you.
I'll tell you what, I've actually been asked to throw my hat in the ring for a couple of those shows to host and stuff, and it just never worked out for time-wise and all that fun stuff. But maybe one day I'd love to do something like that, actually, to host a show where we hunt down monsters and stuff. But I just, that fascination grew as time went on. And as I got older and stuff, and I started understanding even my own personal beliefs in the world around me as far as theological convictions go, it kind of birthed a whole other side of just not, is Bigfoot real, but like, is the paranormal real? Are ghosts real? Because like when you're a kid, parents say, oh, no, don't worry, ghosts aren't real, because they don't want you to be scared. And most time, parents don't even believe that ghosts are real, And so as I got older, and I got more serious about my own Christian faith, I started seeing in the Bible how, you know, things like just simple things like when Jesus was walking on water, that whole story. And the first thing that the disciple said was, "It's a ghost." And I was like, hold on a second. I thought ghosts weren't real. Why is that in here? You know? And so the whole idea of the other side of life as well started fascinating me. And then I had a grandfather who was an evangelist, more like a weekend evangelist. He was a washer, dryer, repairman, but on weekends he traveled all over the place preaching. And he told me some stories that just, man, makes your jaw hit the floor when he told the stories, because like he's talking about, you know, praying for somebody and them like their leg literally growing right there in front of everybody, like thousands of people. My dad was actually in the audience for that one. But even like angels and seeing angels and things like that, just really a lot of stuff that actually happened in front of crowds of people, not just like my grandfather, and my grandfather's telling a story of what he saw, but you know, he's telling a story of what a lot of people saw, a lot of people witnessed all at the same time. So like the whole idea of the paranormal, supernatural side of life really kind of kicked in for me as well. And I put it all aside, you know, as I got a little older into high school and into college and stuff, you know, girls and basketball took over. But me and my wife, we got married young. I mean, we were 21 when we got married, and about 25 years old, I found myself coming home after work just being bored, and I needed something to do. So I started looking into the Bigfoot thing again. I was like, I wonder if that thing is even really out there. And from there, it just kind of grew. And, you know, here I am today where I have a podcast where I talk about all this kind of stuff. And my show is like a lot of people coming forward and sharing their personal experiences. And that's what I wanted to focus on, because I think that's the best way we learn about this kind of stuff, because it's not like I can go rent a book out of the library or borrow a book out of the library where, you know, it will tell me all the answers to life. I mean, this stuff is so, it's so other, because none of us can truly know what's on the other side of this world. And so, you know, it's one of those things where I think that one of the best things we can do for learning is to talk to people who've experienced such things. And it's obviously entertaining for us to listen to, but it's also something where when like this, I believe it was yesterday, I put out episode 221, and I've done over 400 interviews, probably 500 interviews easily over the last 3 years. And, you know, after listening to so many people tell their stories, and you start making connections between different even topics, like all of a sudden you start hearing people say that, you know, something had red eyes. And you know, you hear that a lot with, you know, these dog men that people are seeing. You see that a lot with these demons that people come across. I've even heard that from Sasquatch. So it's like you start hearing very similar characteristics between these creatures and ghosts and whatever it is, and you start thinking, there's some things that are relatable here. And that's the way I learn, I guess. It's just by listening to people tell their stories, and you start over time accumulating all this information that kind of you put into your own mental database.
So I'm seeing a lot of similarities here because, I mean, your childhood, these kind of paranormal events type stuff going on, you know, testimony that you're hearing and stuff like that. This has always kind of been normal for you. And like you, when I was in high school and things, I was too busy really going wild in high school, let me say. And I had to go away to the army to kind of sort myself out, Tony, put it that way. And in the army, actually, funnily enough, you know, you'd be on guard and, you know, you'd be up all night sitting with one guy, and you'd have endless hours to talk about all sorts of things. And it's quite surprising how often the topics used to shift towards UFOs, Bigfoots, all the type of things that we talk about. And I've always had that kind of, that under kind of line interest in the strange, the weird, the X-Files, all that type of stuff. And then when I got out of the army, because that regimented lifestyle had kind of been taken away, Tony, I was like a blank slate again. And like you, I started to find something to fill the time. And for me, you know, that day in September 2001 happened, and it just didn't feel right. And that's when I started diving down the rabbit hole. And here I am now, 1,281 episodes later. And yeah, instead of having more answers, dude, I've got more questions than when I begun with. And I know that you'll have experienced that as well, right? Because you should. By rights, the more people you speak to, like we do, we should build up the knowledge. But it just leaves me with even more questions.
Yeah, you have to be okay with saying, I don't know.
Exactly.
You know? in the beginning, when I first started doing all this stuff, one of the first things that I set out in my own mind was that I don't want people coming to me thinking that I'm going to be answering all their questions of life. When I started the Facebook group, Pennsylvania Sasquatch Research, I told people that, listen, I don't know anything. Like, you guys probably know more than I do. I'm really new on the scene with this stuff. That's why I started the Facebook group, because I wanted to see if there were some people in Pennsylvania that knew about these things, like talking about these things that I could learn from. And but over time, people, joining the group, they're like, asking me questions. And I just, very open and honest with people. I was just saying, I don't know, or this is what I think, but don't take my word on it. And, I'm bound to change my opinion over time. It's one of those things where these kind of topics, you have to remain flexible. You cannot say, like, you you could be what that guy who kind of comes into the room and says, let me tell you what aliens are. Let me tell you what UFOs are and ghosts and Bigfoot. And we all have our own opinions on it. And, certainly I have my own thoughts and opinions as to what these things could be, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it if tomorrow somebody proved me wrong.
Exactly.
I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. And you mentioned about 9/11, that's another thing that we deal with on the show is we do dive into conspiracies when it's relevant and stuff. I would say we do a lot of conspiracy stuff for our members because a lot of the public shows, people are really just craving the paranormal stuff. But, that's another thing that people I've learned over time that the things they marry together, it's the conspiracy angle. Like, if you want to talk about the Clintons and what could be going on with, a lot of people like talking about Pizzagate and all that stuff. Whether Pizzagate is real or not, we do know that elite pedophiles is a real thing because, Epstein is a real was a real person. Well, maybe he still is. Who knows, right? But that whole line of thinking, there's it's not just that they're so entrenched into wanting to, molest and abuse children that they have this whole ring. Like, there's a whole belief system behind that. And it's a satanic belief system. And when you talk about a satanic belief system and what they do with that and how they believe, they operate on a paranormal level. Like, these people do things that literally they're putting their hands into another realm and they're dabbling in things that are paranormal, witchcraft, and things like that. And all of a sudden you see the conspiracy side of life starting to get married with the paranormal side of life.
Everything's connected, Tony, right? And it's really hard to begin with. I remember, when you find out all of these things, and the important thing, and it can be hard, but you've got to think about it from their point of view, from their belief system and stuff that they believe in. Whether you believe in it or not, it's irrelevant, but it's what they basically live and die by. And recently, I used to be right into all that. That used to be the kind of the real stuff we would talk about day in, day out. I don't know about you, Tony. When you talk about that stuff too long, it kind of has an effect on you. You start, it almost stains your soul because it's dark, And like you said there, people crave the paranormal. And I think it's because we're made to ask questions. And things our brains doesn't like when we can't answer something. So these mysteries, these things that we talk about, the woo, I think that's why so many people are drawn to it. And again, it may even be a bit of escapism from the nuts and bolts solid world around them,
Yeah. I've been seeing it in my Facebook group a lot for the Confessionals. The group has, I think it has like 4,200 members in it. And so when you have 4,200 people in a group and they're all posting things, a lot of times it's varied content. But right now we're not in normal times. Right now we're living in a time where we're in a pandemic and everybody has opinions about that. And I'm talking about it because I think it's a very important topic to talk about. I'm not going to ignore it. And so because I talk about it, the group has been flooded with just, coronavirus this, coronavirus that, and very little paranormal stuff. And not only is it something where it's like taxing on me mentally because I'm consuming all this content all the time, but also you see other people saying that they want just to escape from this crap and just go right into paranormal because it's getting real now. And when you talk about like the COVID-19 stuff, you got the Q stuff, the QAnon stuff creeping in where it's like, holy crap, like, are they doing these kind of things with the roundups and all that stuff? Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know
That
what
letter of the alphabet doesn't exist on the Kev Baker show. I live with a 25 letter alphabet, Tony. I do. Yeah, there's not any word begins with that letter in my vocabulary anymore. They've dirtied that word. They've
yeah,
perverted that letter for me. It's wrong. It's wrong. I'm
Stan.
almost triggered when I see the letter Q now.
I'll tell you, like I've over the years, I've had so many people come to me and say, "Hey, have you heard about Q?" Yes, I've heard about Q. But like Kev, you know this as well as I do. Is when you're the person creating all this content and like you doing as many shows as you do, having to always be on to the next show and stuff. When it comes to actually sitting down and saying, "I'm going to research something," it's like it's really hard sometimes to carve out that time to research something. And so, when people were coming to me and saying about Q and stuff, I'm like, yes, I hear about it. I've listened to people talk about it. I know about it. I wouldn't say, I'm in depth in knowledge. And, over time I had said that, if anything, I had started thinking that it was probably like an AI bot kind of thing. Because I'm very big on the idea of artificial intelligence and how advanced it probably is.
We'll need to do another show on that together, Tony. I didn't realize. Look at me, I'm just pouring my tea here. I'm getting settled in for a good conversation, man.
It's fine, bro.
That's where I started off with that 17th letter of the alphabet. See, I don't even say it anymore. Myself and my good friend Scotty, we thought it was like some AI that was out in the rogue, that was dropping, because the language, the way it was all worded and the kill brackets and everything, I'm thinking that looks like AI. That doesn't look like the way a person would speak. But then, unfortunately, it wasn't exciting as that when we dived down that rabbit hole. But that's another story altogether.
Yeah.
And, we're going to get back into the woo now. And we're almost on the first break. And I want to really get back to Pennsylvania, where it all started for you. Because have you ever witnessed the Sasquatch? What's your experiences on squatching, as they call it?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really go out a whole lot anymore, obviously, because my show just takes all my time up. But when I was going out before I started the show, I was going out probably every weekend looking for these things. And it wasn't like I was a researcher, like I'm going out there with my magnifying glass and my notepad and making notes, and I turn left 5 kilometers from here. I was just hiking because, that's essentially what Bigfoot researching is. You go out there, you enjoy hiking, you go out there, you hike around the woods, you go off trail, you have some campfires, and you enjoy yourself and put yourself in the habitats for the possibility of an experience. There are things you can do as far as like, being aware of your surroundings and things like that and know what to look for. And that's what I would do in Pennsylvania. And I traveled, a lot in the state of Pennsylvania looking for these things. I've never seen a Sasquatch. I have come across interesting things. I found a footprint. Actually, I should say I wasn't the one to find it, but I was there when we found it. And we tried casting it, and boy, did we mess that up. The first time casting is always, it's never the good one.
Tell me, but I mean, what size are we talking here?
It was about, I think it was, I want to say, I think it was 15, 16 inches long. And it was on a path, and it was a barefoot. Like I literally put my fingers in the toes, like I could feel the indents of the toes. The ground was dry, and that was another thing with trying to cast it, was that the ground was very dry, so it was like hard. It wasn't like very good for prints, but yet this thing made a print. And when we tried making prints with our boots and stuff, we couldn't get the depth of what this thing had. It wasn't real deep, but granted, it must have been pretty heavy, whoever made it. And we tried casting, it went bad. But that same day, the whole thing was, we actually found what people call tree structures. And I've seen tree structures before and stuff. And, I think that some tree structures, I think a lot of tree structures aren't made by Bigfoot. But then there's some that make you scratch your head and you're like, I don't know what else would have made that. And the one we found, I mean, it was absolutely huge. I mean, it was made of all like tree logs that you could see they weren't cut, they were broken off. They were more fresh than not. And some of these trees, like they were literally like trees that like went like 40, 50 feet up into the air, and making this teepee. And we could walk in, and it was probably about a 12-foot diameter. It was absolutely huge. And then I'd say probably about no more than 100 yards from there is where we found the footprint. And that area was an area that the weekend before there was a sighting, and that's why we were out there. And it's just there was a lot of things that were going on that day or in that area during that time that made me believe that it was at least a hot area for it. There was a lot of quarries, and there's this idea that these things like hanging out around the quarries and stuff.
Dude,
And
hold that thought, man. Oh, what a place to leave it. We're getting into the Bigfoot. We're starting to get into the woo. I've got Tony Merkel here, host of the Confessionals podcast, and we will be right back. Now, Tony, we're still on YouTube. We're still over here on YouTube. So a big shout out to everyone over there in the YouTube audience. But yeah, I remember going to a presentation in the UK here in Glasgow, actually. And I had no idea. I mean, I was into the woo big time and UFOs, Bigfoot, everything. I know most of the Bigfoots around the world. Australia, you got the Yowie, you got the Yeti in the Himalayas, etc. Over here in the UK, we've got something called the Wild Man. And they were showing us these tree structures that you were talking about, and one of the TP type things. And like you were saying there, when I was watching this presentation, I was trying to think, well, let's be logical. What else in the woods would build something like that? And I tell you what, I couldn't come up with anything. No, there's nothing in my mind can come up with something like that. And it's too intricate, too kind of deliberate. It shows almost intelligence in making, you know. I don't know. So you take that evidence, you've got the footprint evidence. I am, without seeing it, I've never seen anything, but I'm a firm believer that there's something there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I've never truly seen anything, but for me, I mean,
I've never seen a plane crash either, but I know they happen.
Right. I mean, after talking to so many people who've seen these things, and people who come across, like you talk to some people in any field, and you're like, oh, that person's a little weird, you know. But this, I mean, I've talked to so many people who are they're very sound-minded, and they tell you their experience and straight face, and they stand by it. And eventually you start saying to yourself, like, golly, like, not everybody can be lying or just straight up not that intelligent to be able to tell the difference between a Bigfoot and a black bear, you know, or something like that, or a big dog. And it's just like, man. And so for me, and I always say to people, like, you have this threshold of belief. So like some people's threshold of belief is like, if I don't see it, I ain't going to believe in it. And then there's other people who are like, you know, like me, where it's like, if you tell me the same story over and over again by a bunch of different people, eventually I'm going to believe it. And that's kind of how I came across the whole idea of believing in Bigfoot. It's just like, man, there's so many accounts out there. Like there's thousands upon thousands of accounts of people who are living today. This isn't like, forget about the history of this, you know, hundreds of years, thousands of years. Like just today, people who are breathing today who say they've seen these things. It's like, man.
No, it's I'm like you, and you know, whether it's aliens or Bigfoot, I don't see the motivation for people to make it up. I know some fantasists out there do. You know, there are people that make stuff up, but not everyone. And there's no fame or fortune on the back of this. If anything, you're going to be a source of ridicule for people around you. That they'll be kind of looking, going, oh, there's the Bigfoot person, you know. So I don't, again, the evidence for me is overwhelming. Now, whether you could take it into a court of law and present a case for it or not, that's another thing. But when we come back, I'll be getting into more of this, the history of Bigfoot, and exploring more woo in the woods. Because I think there's something weird about woods, Tony.
Yeah, you steer the conversation, man. I'll go with it. I can go off a million directions. So just
I'm already thinking to myself, you know, we're going to have to do this more than once, brother, because there's just so many topics out there. We'll get that fellow lover of the woo, Charlie Robinson, on here one time as well. Here we go. Here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Second part of today's Woo Fest with Tony Merkel. No relation to Angela. I hear you all asking. You know, definitely not. Although she obviously, or she could grow a beard like that if she tried. And talking of this man's magnificent beard, dude, I was looking at your website today, right? And I know You're too humble to promote your own stuff, but you've got your own beard oil, man. Now,
Yeah.
listen, let me tell you, as somebody that does this podcasting thing, you've made it when you've got a beard oil named after you. I just want to say that.
Let me tell you, man. First of all, to the Merkel Association, I'm probably the world's only Puerto Rican Merkel. So
At this point, I bet she wishes she was Puerto Rican as well. So
yeah, I was adopted into the last name, but I'm very proud of the last name. I love my family. I love my dad who adopted me. He's a great guy. So, but yeah, so the beard oils, I got a couple here. We have Sasquatch scent, Yeti scent, Hatman scent, Dogman scent, Spectre scent, and we also have beard balms. And so like, what happened is we had this guy who listens to the show. He lives in Alaska and he has a beard supply company. And before I started the show, I actually had a really big beard. You think this beard's big? I had a beard like halfway down my chest. And I did beard reviews for beard supply companies. And when I started the show, I had a stack of boxes in my office that I never got to. And this guy, he emails me saying he has this company and he would love for me to check out his scents and he would love to do a collaboration. I said, yeah, sure, send me some stuff. But I really didn't think much of it because most of these people who are independent, they lack in certain things. Like either they lack in the scent quality, like it just doesn't smell that good. The marketing sucks, or maybe both suck. And so like I wasn't expecting much. And when we got the package, it sat on my counter for like a week. And then my wife said, are you gonna ever open this up? So I opened it up. And I looked at the marketing. I was like, holy crap. Like this guy, he's on point with the marketing at least. And then I cracked it open and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like this guy, he's legit. And so I contacted him right away and we started working on the collaboration. And then last October, we launched the beard oil. And that's why I started growing my beard back again for marketing. But I got two right here I can show you on the camera. This one is a Dogman scent and they smell really good. Like, I mean, this isn't like, you're going to smell like a wet dog if you wear this. Like, or, you know, the Sasquatch scent doesn't make you smell like a dumpster, you know? So like, these are really good scents. This one is Hatman. It's more like a, well, this one right here has actually never gone to market. This is one where he made two different scents for Hatman. I chose a different one. This is like more of a minty scent, but the other one that's actually on market, it's like more of a red look to it. And, it has like tobacco scents in it. It really very manly smell. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I mean, the beard oil is great, so I use it, and you know, it's fun.
That marketing is brilliant, man. Like I said to you before the show, and I seen that today. Just top notch, brother. Top notch. Now, we were talking about the Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. You know, before the break there, you were talking about the footprint and things like that. And it's typical, right? You go to take a cast of it, it all goes wrong. You hear about multiple people that have had sightings, can't get to their camera in time, or usually they're just, you know, in that much awe, they don't even think to take a picture. But any famous stories or any good stories from Pennsylvania that you can think of, you know, in your time speaking to people, you know, about the Bigfoot?
Yeah, there's tons. I mean, Bigfoot's very popular in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of sightings. There's what we call the Pennsylvania white Bigfoot. It's been seen all across the state. In the state of Pennsylvania, you can drive across in about 4 hours to give you the kind of idea of how big the state of Pennsylvania is. And then into Ohio. Ohio is really well known for the white Bigfoot. And there's a video online. I don't know. I know it's not very easily found, but if you just spend 5 minutes looking for it on YouTube, you can find it. If you type in like the Carbondale white Bigfoot or something like that, it should pop up somewhere. And it's this video that came out, I'd probably say about 10 years ago. And I mean, it's one of the most clear videos you're gonna get of a Bigfoot. And this guy's out in the woods and he has a flashlight and he hears it. He's walking through the woods and he shines his light on it. And right when it hits the face, it just darts off the screen. And I've looked at this video and I've slowed it down. I've blown it up. I've really tried analyzing it back in the day before I had the podcast. And when I look at this thing, there are certain things that really kind of hit me hard, which one of the things, the biggest thing for me is when you watch this video up close and slowed down, you really can see the lips move. Like they pinch together when the light hits it. And it's one of those things where it doesn't look like a hood to me because of the way the face actually moves. And then, so there's that video of that. But then we have a friend of mine who was actually my hiking partner. And in 2015 on his he actually went out on Christmas Eve hiking, and he was out by himself. And what got him in the Bigfoot was he saw this giant white Bigfoot darting through the woods when he was up on the Appalachian Mountain. And then another friend of mine, his story is probably one of the most famous Bigfoot stories of current time in Pennsylvania. Dave Groves, he actually he wasn't in the Bigfoot or anything like that. He was an ATV guy. He was riding through the Allegheny National Forest. And he kind of got about 2 miles ahead of his buddy who was new at ATVing. So he just kind of took off and said, hey, I'll wait for you at the one location. Just take your time. Don't rush yourself and wreck. So he gets ahead of this guy, and he starts seeing stones being thrown at his ATV. And so he stops his ATV, and he's looking around, and these things were just pinging off the front. And as he turns and looks, probably about, I think he said about 90 feet away, about that, standing in like an open clearing outside the tree line, was this giant Bigfoot. I can't remember the height. I think I want to say about 7 to 8 feet tall, he says. But it was in a clearing where you could see the entire body up to or down to the like mid shin area. And he said the arms were incredibly long, like abnormally long, like the hands got down to the knee area. And it just stared at him. And eventually, and it was a good while. I mean, I would probably say about 15, 20, 30 seconds. I might be butchering it as far as like all the details, but it wasn't my experience. And he said this thing just kind of backed into the forest until you just out of sight. And I think he said that at one point, if I remember correctly, he had a gun on him, but it never crossed his mind to even think to even pull that out. The same thing with the camera. And that's the thing, like you mentioned about earlier, about people not even thinking about taking pictures. I mean, there's so many times that like as a truck driver, I see some crazy stuff out on the road that would be just awesome to show people the video or picture of it. I don't even think about trying to take a picture of it. Not that I would because of, not being that safe going down the turnpike, but it doesn't even cross my mind. It's because I'm too captivated in the moment of what I'm seeing to even think about taking a picture. And so I think that's a very common thing for people, even that people who are out there looking for these things, if they come across it, it's like a dog that's chasing his tail and he finally catches. He's like, what do I do with this? Like, it catches you off guard. But Dave's experience was very famous because of all the detail he's able to share it in, and the fact that he saw this thing so close for so long, and the whole body. It's not like it was peeking out behind a tree. Like it was standing there wide open. And he thinks that it was trying to distract him from maybe something else. But then Dave got really into the Bigfoot stuff, and he started researching the western side of the state, the opposite side of me. I'm outside of Philadelphia. And so Dave was doing some research in a certain area with a partner of his, and I think they started hearing noises, or they started, they just had this weird feeling. Like that's a common thing that people say, they just have this feeling that they're being watched. And so he started taking pictures of a hillside and never thought anything of it. And I want to say probably like a year or two later, he's just going through his pictures and he sees something in the picture, and he sends it to a fellow UK guy. His name is Bigfoot Tony. He has a YouTube channel. And Bigfoot Tony looked at the photo and kind of did some of his working on it to make it more clear as you zoom in on it. And what we see in this picture is what a lot of people say they see, this white Bigfoot. Now, he said when he was there, he never saw it. He had no clue. But on this picture, what you see, it's like he was really far away. And so like you really had to zoom in, and then Tony kind of cleared it up real good so you can actually see but it looks like there's this like white Bigfoot with an arm going around a tree, just standing there staring at him. And what you see in this picture looks identical to what we see in the video of the Carbondale white Bigfoot. I mean, it's identical.
Wow,
and so,
man,
yeah.
that is and that raises a lot of questions, because you're not aware of it at the time, but it's caught on camera. I mean, are they always there? Just sometimes out of our field of vision, out of the spectrum of light that we look at. And you have to pardon my ignorance here, but I heard you saying they're Pennsylvania. And it's got mountains there, right? And you mentioned a national forest as well, is that right?
Yeah.
These mountains, it's the mountain bit because we've talked a lot in the Kev Baker show about how the Native Americans talk about mountains almost being like natural stargates and things like that. And
Yeah.
this might sound weird. Maybe it won't actually. You might be the one person I can have this conversation with without raising an eyebrow. But
For sure.
when you're in the woods, whether it's the Sasquatch or anything else, don't you feel like there's an energy there? You know, you mentioned being watched, that feeling before. I've often said the forest, it feels alive to me. It feels like a living entity itself, from the canopy of the trees right down to the fungi on the floor, you know? And it's almost like it is a place that's primed, in my opinion, for these weird events to happen. Do you get that feeling as well?
100%. I've always have. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, uh, the big trailer park I lived in, sometimes I would just go play alone by myself. You know, I wasn't the most popular kid growing up and stuff. And sometimes, depending on what the kids' moods were, there would be like a month where I didn't have a whole lot of friends until they decided to be my friend again. And so I would just go out by myself. I'd go out into the cornfields. I'd go on long hikes. This was a day where I was like 10 years old and even younger, and I was able to just disappear an entire day. My mom wasn't worried. Like, you know, nowadays you can't do that. But I would just kind of go off, and I would go down in the woods. And I remember there's this one spot that I would go down into the woods where I would enter into the woods, and it was like I was entering into a different world. As soon as I would step into the woods, like I just had this chill around me, and I would just go because, you know, I had nothing else to do. I was a bored kid, but I definitely know what you're talking about when it comes to that energy when you're in the woods. And then you have this idea that, like, all right, so Sasquatch are known for throwing rocks, right? There's sometimes you see people say that they've seen it happen where this thing threw rocks at them. That happens a lot. People say that they've seen these things throwing rocks. But then there's times that you don't see the Sasquatch throwing rocks, but yet there are rocks being thrown. And sure, you could say it was Sasquatch, but a good friend of mine, Timothy Renner, he said to me something that I'd never thought about before he said this. And it was, you know, woods can be haunted. And who's to say that's not poltergeist activity? And maybe it's not.
Dude, I've got written down here, you know, when you mentioned stone throwing, there's Most Haunted in the UK. It's had a lot of critics over the years, but it's been reported many times by other investigators where you get stones just been thrown. And I went to Alistair Crowley's house, Boleskine house, and there was stones flying about in the room there, right? And then when you were talking about that, I was thinking to myself, you know, this is like almost a trait of paranormal activity. Stones been thrown.
Yeah.
And like you say, whether you see the Bigfoot or not, it's almost like it's one of these... it's just a thing that happens, whether it's a ghost, whether it's a haunting, poltergeist, and now the Bigfoot too.
Yeah, and it's just something that's very common, but it goes along with this idea that there are some things that happen in the woods that you don't want to go through. You know, for instance, with me, I actually, and I wasn't scared. It was definitely something odd. And if it would have advanced any more in the situation, maybe I would have got scared. But I was in Ohio in the Salt Fork State Forest. And it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was with 3 other guys, and all Bigfoot guys. I think at that time, I was at least the only one openly talking about my belief in other wooey type topics and stuff. And so we're hiking this trail, and it's a very thin trail where you can only do single file. And to my left was a steep drop off with a creek running down on the bottom. And on my right is a very steep incline up a hill. And we're hiking, and I look to my right up the hill, and I don't know what made me do it, but I just look up to my right, and I see this light inside the canopy of the forest. Now, it wasn't on the outside, it was on the inside of the canopy, and it was just pulsating. And when it was pulsating, it was like changing colors from like a reddish orange to a white, and it was just like changing colors as it pulsated. And it wasn't moving. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a helicopter on the outside of the canopy that we were just kind of seeing a light. This was very clearly on the inside of the canopy, just hovering in the air, not moving. And we watched it for a good 2-3 minutes, and we all saw it. I think we all saw it, but some guys say they didn't see it. But then it just kind of like pulsated and then just pulsated out and just never came back. It just was gone. and it didn't come towards us. It didn't, move around a whole lot. And I think if it would have came towards us and maybe it moved aggressively, because we hear about people seeing and experiencing this light phenomenon in the woods, maybe I would have got scared. But in that moment, I was just like more in awe. But it's just, the woods are just a very fascinating place to be. Lots of energy there. And I actually had a guy contact me, and I forget what episode it was, but it was well within the first 100 episodes that I interviewed this guy, and he was hunting, and if I remember correctly, he was on like a hillside in a tree stand, and there was a clearing in the woods, and right before him, a church appeared in the woods, just ta-da, like a church. And he said it was extremely real looking, like it looked like very physical. And to be honest with you, it's been so long since I talked to him about that story, I don't remember how it all ended, but I think that he just kind of observed it, and then I think what happened was he just kind of glanced away for a moment, and when he looked back, it was gone. And because I think I remember asking him, like, do you think if you would have gone up to it, if you would have actually been able to go inside of it or something like that? But you hear about those things too, like the disappearing staircases or the appearing staircases.
Oh, the staircases, man.
I am waiting for somebody to contact me about that. I've never had a chance to interview anybody on that, but it's so fascinating because people say they see these things all over the world, like these just staircases in the middle of the woods. It's like, whoa, what is that?
We have spent many an hour live streaming looking at these bizarre stairs, and one of our listeners contacted me with a solution, but it was only to one set, and it was very specific geographically to one set in the UK, but it didn't answer the question of these many others. And I get it, sometimes dilapidated buildings, there's remnants left, but then there's other ones that are just too random, too out there. And we're going to stick on the woods, but I'm going to try and pin you down then. I mean, I'll lay my cards on the table. I think whatever Sasquatch is, and I'm still not quite too sure, I think it's interdimensional. I think it flits between this world and wherever else it goes. But what's your take on everything you've come across so far? I say so far, Tony, because you're like me. You keep an open mind because new information can always come along, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm just waiting for the day to come where something that I think is proven wrong. I'm fine with that. Like it's not going to break my heart. Like I don't like.
Do you remember recently there was the mysterious drones over Colorado?
Yes.
Well, we had a guy from Colorado. Big shout out, good friend Andy comes on the show, talks about technology, and he felt really bad because he had information on what that story was really all about, and it involved drone technology, but he felt bad because he's like, I really don't want to spoil the woo. I don't want to take that out of it, but you're like me, it's about getting to the truth. And sure, we would love everything to be Bigfoot and paranormal related, but in the end of the day, we're truth seekers, Tony, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what gets me excited. Like, that's what gets me excited. The idea of Bigfoot existing doesn't necessarily get me all excited anymore because, I believe it exists. I've talked to too many people for me to think that it's not real. That's for me. But what gets me excited is connecting dots, finding a little piece of the puzzle that I never really connected before. I'm like, wow, what if that's real, And when somebody comes along and shows some information to me that is, kind of blowing that theory out of the water and I buy it, like, it's like, cool. Like we're advancing, we're getting further along. And so I'm all about, just seeking the idea of truth and finding out wherever it leads and stuff. And, I know this isn't where we're going to go, but, it's a big deal for people. If they can stop identifying through their political parties and groups that they belong to, they will free them up to mentally think clearly about the world around them and how they personally truly view it. And when you get to that point, it opens up a whole new dimension to the world around you, because now all of a sudden you're not held down by the constraints of the people around you. You're now free to think outside the box and truly pursue your own knowledge as to what you believe things are and not what people are telling you things are. I'm sorry.
Dude, I'm gonna cut that out for a soundbite. That needs music behind it, man. You're so right. You really are. We were even having a laugh before the show, because we talk to so many people that sometimes as an audience it might get confusing, because sometimes we're on one side of the aisle looking at a topic, and then we'll play devil's advocate when another guest comes on with another point of view, and it almost looks like we're jumping between our opinions are changing all the time. And of course people are always determined to put labels on you. And
Yeah.
you know, whether against Trump, for Trump, I don't like any of them. But if you say one wrong word, then one week you're a Trumper and the next week you're not. It's craziness. And like you say, once you can drop all that, you start to see things a little more clearly, and you start to see more dots. More dots than connections, Tony. That's the problem.
For sure. And you can speak to this, that the more you identify through who you are truly, the less that stuff, like, it's like, whatever, think what you want. But like when you get those messages and those emails saying that, Kevin, you'll say one thing on your show and you'll get two emails that say, one, you're a Trump supporter, while the other one says you're a Hillary supporter. And that is like a badge of honor, because that just says that you think outside the box and people don't know how to define you. And so I'm like, yeah, it is what it is.
We're definitely cut from the same cloth, man. We are. But let's stick on the woods, right? Because there's something else that's weird about the woods and national forests in particular. Because
I'm sorry, I don't think I ever answered your first question as to what I think Bigfoot or
you didn't. You see, you keep me right. You see, it's good working with another host. He'll keep me on track today, folks. This is how I roll, Tony. I go off on tangents and forget where I was ever going.
Me too. But I think that, one, I do think that they're interdimensional. I personally feel like not all of them may be interdimensional, but I definitely do think that the interdimensional aspect of Sasquatch is a very real thing. It's been caught on camera. There's a very well-known video. I always forget the name of it, but it's these ladies who do Bigfoot research, and they're out in the woods, and they had a new person with them that was just getting into the topic, and they came across a Sasquatch, and the lady who was new saw the thing, and she said it was black, it was hairy, it wasn't real big. It probably was a juvenile, and they were filming at the same time, and they didn't know if they caught it on video or not. But you hear them walking back to their camp talking about what she saw. And she was describing seeing this black, hairy, ape-looking thing in the woods. When they reviewed the footage, there was nothing there. The only thing you could see in the video was something looked almost like the predator coming out of a tree. You could see movement, but it was you could see through it. But you could see there was something there moving. And this was taken, I would say probably at least 10 years ago. And so that for me was like, wow. And then so I started looking into it. And because of my background with theology and looking into the scriptures and stuff, I started thinking, because you heard people saying that, oh, well, they're Nephilim. And I started looking at the Nephilim like, I don't think these are the giant human Nephilim that we get in the Bible, though. And that's when I started looking at extra canonical books that are outside of the Bible, but maybe were in the Bible at one time, like the Book of Enoch. And I'm a big fan of the Book of Enoch. One of these days I'm going to have it memorized. But
the minute they take anything out of a book or hide it and try and steer people away from it, it already gives it added value. But yeah, the Book of Enoch, dude, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and people. That's a very good point. The Book of Enoch is still in the Ethiopian Bible, but everywhere else has been taken out. And the Book of Enoch, the very first Book of Enoch, was probably written. I believe it was written by Enoch himself. Now, there's two other books, but they don't seem like they're written by Enoch, but they're called Enoch. But the very first book, it was written like it was a current event thing. Like it was written like he was writing down what was happening around him. And he talks about, and he goes into much more detail as to what Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 was all about. So we hear about that as far as the Nephilim go, and how the fallen angels had sex with human beings, and the offspring were Nephilim, these giant beings like Goliath, right? But when you look at the Book of Enoch, he says, yes, that happened, but it's not all that happened. He says in the book that not only were they trying to defile human beings and disrupt the DNA line of human beings and make sure that, this is me, Tony, speaking, but I believe that the fallen angels were trying to disrupt the DNA line of the future Messiah and also of all mankind. If there was no pure human beings available on earth, then what's the point of Jesus Christ ever coming back to die on the cross for humans that don't exist? And so, but when you talk about the idea of what they were doing, Enoch says that they were doing it with also animals and plants. They were trying to disrupt all of God's creation. And so that's what got me thinking, okay, well, what do you get if you have like an animal like a gorilla or something like that and a fallen angel? Like, you might have a Sasquatch.
Wow. Tony Merkel. And if you want to hear more of that kind of thinking, head on over to the Confessionals podcast.com. 1 hour down, 1 hour to go. Don't go anywhere. Oh, hang on. I've hung up on Tony as well now. Hang on. Wait, I'll call Tony back. I'm getting that excited, folks. I hung up on the guest. Yeah, Tony, I'm that excited. I hung up on the guest. How rude of me. I'm telling you, dude. That was, I'd never thought about it that way before, the way you kind of put it there. And just before we came on air today, we were doing a show, Jimmy Jeans, one of my co-hosts that I hang out with, we were talking about Rh negative and the potential for genetic manipulation in the past. And I suppose that ties in with the way that you explained that there. If you can change the genetics, if you can literally change what it is to be human, you know, a really great way of thinking about it. Now, brother, I'm going to go and fill my coffee cup. I'm going to put some tunes on so you can go and get a new cup of coffee if you need it. The audience can go and fill their cup as well. And we'll be back for the second hour of the show in 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere, folks.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen. Already with today's special guest, and his name is Tony Merkel, and he is the host of the Confessionals podcast. And you can find him on YouTube, the Confessionals podcast, or over at his website, theconfessionalspodcast.com. He's got his very own beard oil, and I tell you what, you need some Mothman or Mothman beard oil on there. I reckon that'd be a winner. You know, make it inclusive, you know, for he, she, or it's out there. Everyone will be happy. You know, all good.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have people, women that buy the beard oil. They said, I didn't know this. I'm not a lady, but I guess some women use oil in their hair, I guess, to keep it, you know,
no,
fresh.
It's for their it's literally for their beards, honestly. It's a new world we live in, Tony. It's a brave and a strange new world, my friend. But you know, before the break, we were getting into all things Bigfoot there, and I want to ask you. You were talking about the biblical side of things there, but in your research, I mean, what are the earliest reports that could be attributed to some kind of Sasquatch type kind of creature?
Are you talking biblically? Biblically,
or just in history? You know, throughout history.
I mean, I think it goes. All right, so let's just say in North America, where I live, you see the Native Americans talk about it. They have ancient tales of it. They all had different types of names for it, but they have legends of coexisting with these things. It wasn't like they were just, you know, running and hiding from these things. There's legends of them actually trading and having trades with them, and it wasn't just like, you know. These things are out in the wild and we're scared of them and we're hiding from them. There's some Native Americans who said that they actually had trades with them. And I didn't know how to react to that because, you know, some of the Native American legends and stuff, when I first started getting into this stuff, I wasn't sure, I mean, how reliable is it, all that stuff. And then I started learning about the Native Americans and their history. And what they would do is when a child was young, they would identify a child who was typically pretty smarter than the others, and that had a very good recollection of being able to recall things. And that person, or I should say that child, at that point was trained to be the tribal historian. And so they would be told all these stories, and they would then tell these stories throughout their generations and stuff until they became old, and they relayed those stories to the next person who was identified as the person to share these stories. And so it wasn't just like everybody just sharing stories. It was very specific on how they did it. And so I started thinking, okay. And then they would also talk about, you know, Sasquatch, where there would be, they would actually make fire, they say. And so when I first heard that, I was like, come on, really? Like, these things would be making fire? Because at that time in my life, I wasn't thinking these things were anything special other than an unknown primate we haven't found yet in the woods. And then I came across a video of a bonobo that was fascinated by fire, and saw on a YouTube video that how to make a fire and cook on it. And the bonobo actually did it. It struck a match, lit the fire, and cooked marshmallows and hamburgers on a fire. And I was like, man, if like a bonobo can do that, then surely a Sasquatch could do that as well. And so there's these ancient tales of this stuff. As far as biblically goes, I don't. There's people that say that Esau was a Bigfoot. They like to point to that because of the description of Esau being a very hairy person. I don't. Outside of the hairiness of Esau, I don't know what else would point to the idea that he was a Bigfoot. And then that would mean that Esau was actually birthed from a human mother. And how does that all work? And so I don't know if Esau was actually Sasquatch. I'm not against the idea of it, but it's one of those things where I just don't personally know a whole lot about how that would work. But, you know, like we were talking about earlier in the book of Enoch, I think that might be a telling of something like that, where I think the book of Enoch is probably the oldest book we have on Earth. I mean, this was well before Jesus, and we have it, you know, I have a copy of it right here. It's like you hear about these ancient these ancient stories of these or not aliens. Some people say they're aliens, but I say these fallen angels coming and doing this on Earth. And then you mentioned about the side of Bigfoot where it's like, you know, interdimensional and things like that. Well, I would say that if you think about it, so fallen angels, they're interdimensional, right? I mean,
Yep.
angels are interdimensional beings.
Yep.
And if they're able to procreate and create, offspring with human women and animals here on Earth, wouldn't some of those offspring then maybe have certain types of DNA within them that allowed them to do such things like their ancestors? Just like, for instance, I have a twin brother and sister. They're both Puerto Rican. One is extremely light skinned. I mean, she's very pale compared to her brother, who's her twin, who's extra crispy. Donnie's so dark. And so they're twins. They're Puerto Rican, but they look very different because they have different DNA. Like they just do. And so I started thinking, well, maybe these things, not all of them, but maybe some of them do have a particular part of their DNA from their ancestors that allows them to do such things. Because again, you hear these stories, and at some point you're just like, these things seem to be able to do certain things, but not all of them. Some of them act very physical, like just very primal physical creatures. But then these other times they seem very, very paranormal.
Yeah, and I mean, even one way of looking at the Bible as well, Adam and Eve. I think Eve is made of the rib of Adam. And I mean, this is high technology and science that we're talking about. It's almost the stuff that we're doing today with CRISPR, Cas9 and things. And you've really got me thinking about it, because if they were playing around genetically with humans, then why wouldn't they be playing around with other things as well, trying to corrupt that DNA or create whatever it was they were trying to create? And you look at the Sumerian statues of half man, half beast. Who knows what was going on? And my good friend Joe Joseph, he said to me years ago, Kev, think of the world more like Lord of the Rings. Small people, big giants, everything. It's like a fantasy movie. But the more I learn, Tony, the more it is starting to appear like that. And myths about dragons and the Bigfoot, like you're talking there. These oral traditions, they really are at the heart of these types of people that rely on that. And it's not stuff that they were making up. This was factual events that they were passing down and maintaining that kind of tradition for future generations. So this is really fascinating the way we're taking it. And I want to get into something else related, perhaps, but definitely in the same location, same environment, and it's the forests, and the national forests more particularly. And this phenomenon where you get people going missing randomly, and there's David Paulides out there missing 411. Now, have you come across any kind of cases where any of these missing type cases have been attributed to Bigfoot, or any kind of interconnection between Bigfoot sightings and the locations where people go missing, maybe?
Personally, I have not. I've never talked to anybody who had a story to share where somebody went missing, at least that I can recall. But obviously, I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. And I definitely think that some of those cases have all the signs of Sasquatch being involved. And then some of them don't seem like they're Sasquatch at all. And so I know David has his own method on how he kind of selects these very specific stories and happenings to exclude like human behavior. I mean, he's saying that pretty much, from what I understand, pretty much what he's talking about, these cases, he's already excluded your traditional abduction type of thing. And so, but then you take the idea of alien abduction is a possibility. And on top of it, I personally don't exclude human activity, especially like I'm very passionate about what's happening to our children in this world and the abductions going on. And I do believe that there is an elite ring of people abducting children for their own nefarious means. And is the woods a place where they would do that? I don't know, but it's certainly a great place to snatch a child if you're out there and you know what you're doing. And so when you look at the statistics of how many kids go missing every year and stuff, it's astronomical. It blows your mind. I mean, I think in the United States alone, we have over 400,000 kids that go missing every year. and it's just like, where do these kids go? And so, I mean, but you hear about some of these stories of these kids hiking down a trail, and like dad's right in front of them. They turn around. They were just talking to him, and then they turn around and the kid is gone. To be honest with you, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't like thinking about this because ever since I've become a father 2 years ago, I've changed emotionally.
Yeah,
And this,
it does. It flicks a switch in you, man.
it scares me so much. Like I'm so protective of my son, and the idea of something like that happening, it just seems so out of your control. It scares me to even think about it. But yeah, as far as relating to Sasquatch, I definitely think that it's a possibility, but I also think that there's a lot of other possibilities alongside of that. And you know, I respect David Paulides, and I've never talked to the man personally.
Same here. I would love to speak to him one-on-one. You know, I think it'd be a riveting conversation. And you know, I'm interested in true, real crime as well. And there's some maniacs out there, and like you say, you know, child or adult, you know, these people, the woods, what a perfect place for them, a literal hunting ground, Tony. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think there's one explanation covers the full 411 gambit, but it's really weird the way that the national parks kind of act around all of it. You know, and we've only got David's word to take on it, but he says he has real problems getting, like, the list of the numbers of people that go missing. I mean, why should it even be a problem to let that number out? It's steeped in weirdness. And part of me wonders if some of these, not all of them, but some of them, again, it's back to the woods. Is there some natural portals that open there? And sometimes we just walk through, like the church. Yes. You know, maybe it just looks like the wood in front of you. You're talking to somebody and then blip, you're gone. You know, sounds weird, but who knows?
No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, who knows what's going on in this world? When you have CERN doing what they're doing now, I think this year, or maybe it was last year, CERN was completely shut down or something like that, from what I understand. But with what they're doing, and I'm not a scientist, I'm a truck driver with a podcast, so I think about stuff, but I'm not a genius. But when I think about what they're doing there, it surely could have repercussions all around the world. And they're talking about opening up portals. They're talking about going into other dimensions. We have scientists who will openly tell you, yes, I forget what show it was, but there was a scientist on, a very well-respected scientist, and they kind of joked around about the idea of the upside down from Stranger.
It was the head of the Department of Energy, Ernard Munst, on the Chelsea Handler show. I played that. I'll never get tired of playing that clip, dude. No.
Right there, he's telling you, yes, we play in other parallel universes. They're real. Like, they're absolutely real. And so it's like, with what CERN's doing and opening up black holes, is it possible when you're dabbling with this kind of stuff that you could accidentally open up these portals all over the world? And maybe they're opening up all around us, but we just don't see it. And so some people
say accidentally, and yet, Tony, you're a truck driver with a podcast. I'm just an armchair information analyst. I know a little bit about a lot of stuff and not a lot of stuff about many things, but you know, we aren't the ones that are like just making up that they're opening these portals. That they're doing it on purpose. You know, oh, look at them with a key stood there talking about opening up other portals to parallel realities, and it makes it more interesting for people like me and you, though, because I think if we are making that veil between this world and who knows how many other worlds more porous, you would expect to see more paranormal activity kind of coming our way. And I don't know about you, but it seems to me like over the past couple of years, things have really started to increase. Whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's ghosts, UFOs. What's one of the more interesting subjects outside of the outside of the Bigfoot thing that you really cover?
Well, I'm as time goes on, I change. So as far as my personal excitement of interest, when I started, it was Bigfoot. But then as I started hearing more and more people talk about their experiences, I started really getting into this idea of, you know, the typical, you know, generic idea of paranormal, ghosts, demons, and, you know, all the possibilities there. And then I got into the UFO phenomenon and the idea of these abductions happening where people are claiming to be involved in these 20 and backs where they're abducted into a secret space program And when they're done serving their time, they're literally dropped back into the time they were taken. And there are a lot of people that talk about that. And you talk about the becoming a super soldier and MK Ultra and all that stuff. And so that kind of really got my interest peaked and stuff on many different levels. And I forget your original question. This is what happens.
Just any of the other topics that you've come across, while doing your podcast in the last few years. But yeah, I remember having Captain K, Randy Kramer, on the show. He's one of those people that claim to have done the 20 and back, you would call it. They go away and basically serve their time and come back, and hardly any time's passed. And that was one of the most riveting shows that I've done. The only thing that that really sticks in my mind when I do these types of shows, though, is trying to prove it, and you're having to take the word of one person or a couple of people. And I'm a sci-fi geek. I mean, I'd love to see the nuts and bolts of what's going on along with the testimony of these people to really solidify that. And hey, I'm there, dude. I mean, Gary McKinnon, a fellow Scotsman, he was the guy that hacked into NASA. Well, you don't hack into NASA when there's no password on there. And he was seeing that there was transfers between terrestrial and non-terrestrial officers. So I'm open to it, but it's getting that more nuts and bolts evidence to really win people over and convince them too,
Well, there's things that kind of get me, like with that topic alone. There's so many, like Bigfoot. There are different branches you can kind of go off into and stuff. But with this topic, there's so much stuff you can go down. So I mean, MK Ultra, mind control, deep underground military bases, and then there comes the cryptid phenomenon back into the deep underground military bases of people seeing. But then this deep underground military bases are all over the world, all over the United States, and supposedly they're connected. And so people are able to travel in between these different bases and stuff, like almost instantaneously. And I don't understand it, but I've heard it described as almost like a portal that they're pushed in through. I've heard other people describe it as almost some kind of magnetic energy that they're able to be thrusted so fast and into it. But I mean, people are talking about traveling across the country within a matter of minutes.
Yeah, you've got Pine Gap down in Australia as well. And I remember hearing about people, like you say, some portal technology, who knows what you call it.
Yeah.
But literally, here 1 minute, down there the next. And we've got underground bases here too. And I noticed on your website, actually, while we're talking about this, the underground bases are being manned and locked up and ready for action. But what do you make of all that, dude?
Well, I think that I'm trying to get a guy on my show for next week to talk about this, but I think we might be gearing up for war. Here in the United States, we have, everywhere, we're dealing with coronavirus. And but in the United States, we started seeing about 2 weeks ago, we started having people, filming video of these trains rolling in tanks and armored vehicles into Chicago and LA, Los Angeles specifically. And so, between Chicago and Los Angeles, we're talking about 1,200 miles. It's a very big distance. And people were really freaking out about it. And I've heard people say that, oh, well, they move this stuff all the time. It's just you're noticing it now. I dabble with this community a lot. For me, never to have seen it happen so much in a week. People send me a lot of stuff, and I've never seen it pop up this much in video format. But when you're talking about LA and Chicago having tanks rolling in and stuff, people were getting this idea that, well, we're getting locked down. So, I mean, I don't know how politics work in all of the other countries, but in the United States, it's supposed to be hard to implement martial law. And I could go on about that, but people are saying that they're locking us down, they're going to put us in martial law, and they're going to come knocking on our doors. And it's like, you got to take a break there for a second, because our military are citizens of the United States. And I have a very hard time believing that our National Guard, this isn't even like Marines or Army, the National Guard, I don't believe those people who work amongst us as civilians all the time, unless they're enacted, are going to be willing to just walk down their neighborhood streets and take people out of their homes that don't, agree with whatever they're trying to implement. So the idea of an attack from our own military, I don't think is the issue here. I think we're rolling tanks into cities and stuff because I think they're preparing for the possibility of an attack. And that's why I think we're locking down our essential military personnel and deep underground military bases so that one, they're safe from the coronavirus and, keep them away, because if we're attacked, we need to be able to defend ourselves. But I also think that they are looking at the reality that for the last 10 years and for the next 10 years, over a 20-year span, if you take this chunk of time and you say, if we want to attack and invade the United States, when's the best time to do it? Right now is the best time to do it, because we're distracted. Most of the country is staying home. They're not out and about driving the streets and stuff. We're in our homes, and we're willingly saying we'll stay in our homes. So that's another thing that I say to people, that if they want to implement martial law, they're not going to do it by force. They're going to create an environment where you willingly choose enslavement over an invitation of freedom. And so that's where I think we're at right now, where everybody's staying in their homes. And I think right now, if China or maybe Russia, or I would say China, though, more than anybody, wanted to invade us and wanted to attack us, like the movie Red Dawn, I think now is the best time you're ever going to have, because we are distracted. We're pulled thin. I mean, I think we have over 1 million National Guard troops pulled throughout the entire country. I mean, we are really pulled thin with this thing. And I think this is a time where they're concerned about the idea of being attacked and invaded.
I mean, we've only just started talking before the show, but I was in the army for a heartbeat, just over 4 years. But I was, we had a caller to the show the other night. Big shout out to Rick in Scotland. And he was a Marine. And like you were saying there, and I'm glad you said that, it's important that people realize that, especially when it comes to the US, the National Guard, they're US citizens, they're your neighbors, they're people's brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. And we were taught crowd control. And I was trying to reassure the people over here, because we've got the troops out now, that they're helping with things over here. It's a global thing. We're all at varying levels of it. And I was just trying to reassure people that these people would willingly put down their lives for us. Yes. They're not there to come against us. And we were never, and Rick agreed with me, he was never ever trained that one day, stay quiet, we're going to have to turn on the people. It was never like that, Tony, And again, I'm talking about one guy's experience 20 years ago, but I don't think these people have ill intentions. They're people like us,
Yeah, I mean, and this isn't like in some countries where when you turn 18, you have to serve in the military for 4 years or something like that, where you're brainwashed and you're forced into doing things. Like in the United States, everybody who's in the military chose to be there. They're volunteers. And so like you have people who are volunteers that love their country and are willingly going into the military to defend their country and to serve their country, to serve their citizens. There's no way you're going to get a mass amount of military personnel to turn on their neighbors, their family, and do what the overlords say. It's just very it's a fantasy. I don't see that being real. But what I do see being real is when you take the reality that we're seeing these tanks rolling into these cities and stuff, like very real. It's very real. Why?
Good question, man.
They're preparing. I think they're preparing for the possibility of an attack. They have intel. They know what's going on. They know that they're weak right now. If Tony, the truck driver of the podcast, is saying that we're weak right now, like the military knows that this is the best time for an attack.
Somebody at the Pentagon right now is going, here, you want to listen to this Tony guy? He's got his finger on the pulse. Maybe we should be getting ready, But we laugh, we joke, and when we come back on the other side of the break, we are going deep diving through the woo, because I'm going to get Tony's thoughts on multiple topics. I'm going to be asking him about the Mothman. I'll be asking him about the Men in Black. All things woo coming up after the break. Now, before we get there, Tony, let everyone know where they can hear your podcast, because it's a sneaky suspicion that if anyone likes the Kev Baker show and the topics we cover here, they're going to absolutely love your show. So let them know where to hear it, when they can hear it, everything you got for them, man.
Yeah, so we do have a YouTube channel, but I don't upload the shows a whole lot to YouTube because, YouTube pisses me off. So, but we do any podcast playing app. So you have Apple, um, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora. You can listen to podcasts on our shows on there, The Confessionals, or you can go to theconfessionalspodcast.com and get every show there. We do have member content, so if you're a member, you can actually get extra shows. Every Thursday, we put out a bonus show for members, and recently we've been trying to kick it up and trying to do at least one live show every week for the members, where it's a live call-in show. They can call in and talk to me and the guest. But yeah, I mean, that's basically the best place to get the content that I'm putting out, is either on a podcast playing app of your choice or the website itself, theconfessionalspodcast.com, and all the stuff is there, blogs, news.
Do you do your own art, man? That is some good thumbnails you've got going on there, dude.
I've been blessed. I've been blessed where I have very talented listeners who volunteer to do such things. And two of the artists that were working for the show, they were doing a volunteer, and they actually full-time artists for Disney and Netflix. They do the movie posters, and they were doing it for free for me.
Wow,
and then there's
dude.
in Hawaii,
Hold
Lika,
that thought. We'll be right back, folks. One more segment with Tony Merkel to go. There we go. I didn't hang up on Tony this time. Bonus. But dude, I have loved this so far. And we're going to go on a whistle-stop tour of the woo when we come back. But I really hope we can do this again sometime.
Certainly.
There's no danger we could ever get into all of the topics that you touch on, all of the topics we touch on here. But the more I'm listening to you, the more I'm seeing why Charlie Robinson said, you two guys need to get together. Because we're definitely on the same page about a lot of things. And listen, even if we weren't on the same page, who cares? Because, you know, we can still talk about things. We can still discuss things. And that's something I really try and emphasize to the audience, you know. And you were sharing with me, you know, you've had Wiccans coming onto the show. And I've had real-life witches coming on. And man, oh man, the first time I done that, and a big shout out to Tia out there, you know, the TV psychic, I didn't realize it would trigger so many people. So what I done was, I hurriedly booked her again for another show. Because you know what? If it rattles people out of their normalcy bias and it kind of really angers them, then it might cause people to think about things a different way. Because me and you, we're not only open to, we encourage looking at other belief systems, other people's opinions, because it's only then you formulate that bigger kind of picture, isn't it?
100%. I mean, that's exactly what I tell people. I know when I put out certain shows that I'm going to get a lot of angry emails for certain things. And I always tell people, like, that's a good thing that you're being exposed to other people's viewpoints. If you don't agree with them, you should still listen to them, because you're literally gaining intellect by listening and understanding how other people think and view the world around you. I mean, there is no downside into hearing people that you do not agree with. You could staunchly not agree with them, and that's fine. But to turn them off, you're literally doing yourself a disservice, because you're truly not gaining any knowledge as to what's going on in the world around you. Like you're isolating yourself into a bubble that it's not healthy for the long term. I mean, you need to expose yourself on how other people view the world around you. There are lots of people on my show that I interview, and you listen to the interview and it's a great time. Like we talk, we have a conversation, but I don't agree with everything that they said, but they have the right to say what they believe. And I firmly believe that I'm gaining every time I talk to somebody who I don't agree with. And so that's just how I view the world. And that's why I try to get my audience to view the world as well.
No, absolutely, dude. I couldn't agree with you more there. So, yeah, when we come back, Mothman, Men in Black, that type of thing, we'll get a quick talk about all of the above. And it doesn't really matter what kind of paranormal or supernatural stuff that I end up talking about. I find all of it equally fascinating. Is that what you find as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I don't ever like go into one of these topics and think, oh no, we're not talking about Mothman again today, are we? I don't know. It's endless. Like, I just love it.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated by it too and stuff. And there are some topics that I kind of maybe shy away from on my own show, because I just don't feel like dealing with the aftermath, like flat earth, like whether you're for or against it, like it doesn't matter. You're going to get heat from every side if you talk about flat earth. And it's just like, there's so many other topics to talk about. I really don't dive into flat
You,
Earth.
you see how I stay away from it? I usually tend to say, well, until it affects how I'm going to pay tomorrow's bills, I'll let other people worry about that because the shape of my playing field doesn't change whatever you tell me. Crack on, you know?
People who get so upset about whether you believe it's flat or you don't believe it's flat, like you have, like for me, I'm
Here we
like,
go, dude. Here we go. We've almost
Okay.
missed our cue to come back. You see, this is a good sign. Hey, there we go. Oh, you see, you always know you're having a good show when the conversation during the break distracts me to the point where I almost forget to come back. So we're moving into the last part of the show with Tony Merkel. And don't forget, check out his podcast, the Confessionals podcast.com. You can get it on iTunes, it's on iHeart. I urge you to check it out. It's all things woo. And talking of all things woo, then, let me ask you about a couple of topics that we often get into here on the show. And one thing that's really intrigued me lately, and I'll get your take on this because they kind of hang around the periphery of all the stuff we talk about. And it's the Men in Black.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've looked into John Keel's work on the Men in Black and things like that, but on your take, what do you make of these? I don't want to say people, because there's something super weird about them, but your take on them, Tony.
Yeah, listen. If you told me 10 different theories as to what the Men in Black were, I'd probably sit here and do, yep,
Uh-huh.
Because it's so weird. And the funny thing is that there are so many tales of the Men in Black, yet I feel like recently, at least for me and my personal, environment where I operate in, I don't get a ton of reports of the Men in Black, but I know that I've heard lots of different stories, but I've also heard different descriptions of these guys. Like sometimes they seem like Men in Black, but they're not in black though. Like you would think, oh, that's Men in Black, until you realize that there are two people, and this is common with the Bigfoot community and talking about where apparently if you tend to have if I'm sitting here talking about Bigfoot and I say I saw Bigfoot 10 times, it was amazing, and tell you all the details and stuff, I don't think that they're that worried about it. But what they're worried about is if you can prove it. And that's when these characters pop up. And so if you say that if I had somebody on my show and they said that they shot a Bigfoot and they have the bullet they shot it with because it went right through the leg into the tree, and or maybe they killed it and they have the head in their basement, I think that's a problem. And if you're for real and you're telling the truth, I think you're going to have a visit from these guys. But from the Bigfoot world, and I don't know if it's that they're not Men in Black or what, it's two guys that tend to pop up. One is dressed real clean and sharp looking, almost like in a suit. And another guy's kind of wearing just like regular street clothes. And he's like the rough kind of guy. And they pop up shortly after the experience happens. They're asking you questions. They're taking information, but they're also confiscating evidence. And I've heard of these different types of experiences where people come forward and they share that I shot this thing and I can prove it. That's when these guys pop up. And so it has this kind of characteristics of the idea of Men in Black, but it doesn't seem like they're Men in Black. But then the actual Men in Black that are popping up and they're in these dress suits, black and stuff, it's usually, one or two guys. You're right. It's very weird. It's almost like they're extraterrestrials operating in a human suit, almost like the movie Men in Black, where it's like that Edgar suit, it's like they're wearing a human suit, but they're just, it's like they don't know how to act like a human 100%.
So weird. And like you say, I read a story like the one you're talking about just recently on Mysterious Universe, where somebody claimed they'd shot a Bigfoot and only for what you would describe, like you talked about there, two people turn up, body gone, and all evidence the person had now gone, so you've only got their word to take for it. And then there's these other ones that turn up around the UFO sightings, around any paranormal event can seem to trigger a visit from these things. Because like you say, they look human, but then when they go to interview people and they say they're from the local paper, they don't know how to work the recorders they've got.
Yeah.
Some of them don't know what time's all about. One of them, I remember John Keel writing about they had a smoothie. It's like they'd never seen a smoothie before, this type of thing. Really, really bizarre. And of course, this leads us to another topic that I want to ask you about and get your take on. Because John Keel, his name's synonymous with the Mothman, right?
Yeah.
And the Mothman, the big red eyes, you mentioned the red eyes with the Sasquatch earlier. And I'm listening to a book right now about Oak Island. And I tell you what, I mean, I love the TV show, The Curse of Oak Island, and everything that goes with it. But there's a story in there about one of the people who is acting as a night watchman on Oak Island while one of the digs is going on. And it was not long after one of the tragedies that had taken place. There was 4 deaths on the island. And this gentleman came home in the middle of his shift, never ever went back to Oak Island again. There's a big story that goes with it, but he'd been searching many times. And what he told his wife was that he had been asleep in one of the shacks there, and he got woken up with this horrendous noise and then a pressure on him, and he had bruises on his arms. And he said all he could describe it was as this massive hairy thing and bright red eyes. And this was Oak Island. And I'm thinking, and I only heard this part of the book yesterday before you're coming on the show. So your take on the Mothman, the red eyes, what's your take on all of that stuff, man?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's natural.
No, hell no.
Well, some people, I mean, I live in Pennsylvania. I'm not far from Point Pleasant. Like, I could drive there within maybe 6 hours. And, like, there are people who say that they think this is a natural thing. Like if any, like some people say, if anything about it being paranormal, they would say it's a Thunderbird or something like that. But when you hear some of the, and there's people who experience this phenomenon of Mothman, not just in West Virginia, but throughout the country. It's been popped up in Chicago. It seems like it's very paranormal, but there are people who believe that maybe this is extraterrestrial as well, or maybe a time traveler of sorts. But I've never heard, what was that book about Oak Island, before I forget, because I wanted to ask you, that book, I wanted to make sure I check it out.
I'm going to get the exact name of it, but I actually think it's called The Curse of Oak Island because the author's been on the show, the History Channel show. He's appeared on the actual one of the episodes. Just want to make sure. I'll get the guy's name. I want to give the guy credit as well. Book. Here it is here. Amazon, that's the one. Yeah, the author is called Randall Sullivan, and it's The Curse of Oak Island, the story of the world's longest treasure hunt. And it documents all of the searches that have gone on, and yeah, this is after one of the tragedies. And I had to rewind it, because I listened to it on Audible. And I tell you what, Tony, this is, Oak Island's already, it's brilliant, it's fascinating, right? But then this account of what sounds like a Bigfoot or a Mothman, you know, in a shack with somebody there. And it would have been around, I want to say 50s time, 50s, 60s possibly. So yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah, that's actually, if it's like the 50s and stuff, I mean, Patterson Gimlin film was shot in California in 1967. And I mean, that was really what launched Bigfoot into the mainstream pop culture that we know it to be today. And if that happened before that, he may not even had like a word for what he described it as. I don't know if he said it in the book as a Bigfoot, but like,
no, he just described this thing, a large thing with red eyes and really hairy. No name for it, nothing. That's all he said to his wife, you know.
I mean, when we're talking about, like, even here in Pennsylvania, I mentioned the guy earlier in the show, Timothy Renner. He writes some books about Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, and he goes through, not ancient, but really old articles, and he pulls out these articles from the 1800s of, like, in newspapers saying that, you know, Hamburg, Pennsylvania had a hairy man sighting, and all the men in town went out in the woods looking for this thing. And that was a common thing. And he tracks these things all over Pennsylvania and stuff. So, but that's my point in saying that was back in those days, they didn't call it Bigfoot. They didn't know what to call it. So a lot of times they were called like a hairy man sighting. And it was a common knowledge that the hairy man was this big, wild, hairy man. That's all they knew what it to be and stuff. And so that story of Oak Island
this would have been just after 1966, before the 70s anyway.
Okay, 1966.
It was the Restall family, and it was a father and son. There'd been some gas had come out one of the shafts, and they'd gone in to save the father, and then the gas got 4 other people. And it was actually the guy who had gone down and taken them out one by one. It was him who was working as the night watchman, who eventually he just would never go back after that day. Didn't talk about it, nothing. Took him years to tell his children what was going on. A man's type of man back in the day, and he didn't want to admit to the fact that he'd been absolutely scared crapless.
I mean, I would be too.
Exactly. I mean, what? It doesn't matter who you are. Big red-eyed hairy thing. So
Yeah.
what do you think then? The Mothman, these things. Is there a connection, Sasquatch and Mothman?
Well, I don't know if there's a connection between the two specifically, but then like the red eye thing is the connection, right? And that's what we were talking about earlier in the show, how you hear people share their experiences so many times and you start picking up pieces from people's experiences that match other people's experiences, but they're not talking about the same topic. And so like, for instance, so you talk about this idea of Sasquatch having red eyes. It's not common. But there are people who say that they saw a Sasquatch with glowing red eyes. Then you have the Mothman, glowing red eyes. Then you have this idea of Dogman, and people say that they see it with glowing red eyes. There's a story of a guy who he went to bed with his wife angry. They're having a terrible argument, and they're laying in bed, neither one's sleeping, and he starts seeing these like shapes appearing in the room, like in air, just like these different weird shapes. I think he said they were red shapes. And he kind of nudges his wife and he's like, "Are you seeing this?" And she says, "Yeah, I've seen this." And then something deep down inside of him tells him that he needs to look to his left. And so when he looks over to his left, he sees this giant dog standing there in his room on all fours with glowing red eyes. And so again, there's this demonic dog-like entity appearing out of nowhere with glowing red eyes. And so, and then even that feeling of him saying that I felt like I just needed to look to my left. How many times do we hear that with Bigfoot experiences, paranormal experiences, where somebody looks to their left or right, and there it is, like a shadow man standing there in the doorway
It's
looking
like
at
our
them.
subconscious screaming at us, isn't it? You know?
There's something that's communicating to our inner person that there's something wrong, there's something off, and we need to learn to listen to that. We really do, because I think, well, maybe you don't. Like, if you don't listen to it, maybe you'll never see anything. So, but I mean, I think that the more you listen to that inner voice and stuff, the more you're gonna have experiences, because there's something. It's like a magnet. It just pulls you, and it's telling you that there's something there. I mean, even for instance, like in my own house. I mean, that I'll tell you a story real quick. So I'm sitting in this very room doing an interview, and typically when I'm doing interviews late at night, like I do interviews all times of day, but if it's late at night and stuff, a lot of times I have my lights turned out and stuff, and so I'm in a dark room, and my wife sent me a text message while I'm in the interview, and she says that she just saw a red light appear in our bedroom, and it was next to the TV, and then it shot off, and I left a light trail. Well, I'm in the middle of talking to somebody about their paranormal experience, and I mean, like, this is a job for me. Like, I treat my show like a job. It's not a hobby. I do this as professional as possible. So I'm thinking to myself, good luck, babe. Like, I'm in the middle of an interview. I'm not ending this right now.
You're on your own.
You're on your own. And so that happened. And so the next day we talk about it. And so I didn't think anything of it. And then like a month or two later, again, I'm in here, I'm doing interviews late at night. I go to bed, I get in the bed, and my son's laying in the bed next to my wife, so I'm trying to get situated and stuff so that I'm not laying on him. And we have these.
Oh, I remember those days well, man.
Oh, it happens a lot.
I remember when 3 in a bed meant a totally different thing, but no, yeah, I remember that. Yep, it all changes when you have babies, man.
It does, man, it does. And we have another one on the way, so it's only going to be.
Congratulations, brother, congrats.
So I'm in the bed, and I'm taking my son doesn't like covers, so like and I like covers, so I'm trying to pull the covers over but keep them off of him, so I'm piling up on my torso, and so I'm laying on my side, and I have a pile of covers on my torso that's blocking my view from my feet and the bottom of the room and all that stuff. It's probably about a foot or two high, like it's just a pile of covers. And so between the pile of covers on my hip and my eye, so we're talking about 2 feet of distance, I see a red light appear, and it shoots off and leaves a light trail, just like my wife described.
Whoa.
And I was like, whoa, I just saw that. And my wife, and the first thing I thought of was, Lindsay told me this like a month or two ago, and I just saw it again. And then it hit me. I saw this before somewhere, and it hit me that so before we bought this house, we lived in an apartment complex, probably like 15, 20 minutes away from here. And I would be sitting in my living room in the apartment, and I'd be watching TV, and in the chair, I could kind of see down the hallway a little bit. It was on an angle though. And on the one wall that I could see in the hallway, we had pictures lined up on the hallway. So when the lights were on, you could see a reflection in the pictures when somebody walked by from like the bedroom to the bathroom or something. And a lot of times I would see a reflection of somebody walking from the bathroom to the bedroom, bedroom to the bathroom. Sometimes my wife would be home and back there, and I'd go back and ask her, and she'd say, no, she didn't move. But sometimes I'd be alone in the apartment, and there's nobody there. And so I'm like, so I would sit there in the chair, and I'd stare down the hallway and try to like wait for it to happen, because it happened all the time. But every time I was intently looking, I would never see anything. But it was always at the corner of my eye. I would see it, and I would see it with my glasses on, my glasses off. So it wasn't just a reflection thing off the TV. And so I had this feeling that there's something weird going on in the apartment. I didn't know what it was, but I just had this weird feeling. And I didn't have research equipment or anything like that. And so the only thing I had was my wife's laptop. And so the one night I set it on my nightstand next to me in the bed, and I decided to record video all night while we were sleeping in the bedroom, pitch black room. And the next morning I woke up at like 5 o'clock because I had to go get to work. And I was just curious. I was like, let me just see if I can see anything in this video real quick. So I started skipping through it. Within the first 10 minutes, and I'd never watched the whole video because it freaked me out. I wasn't expecting to see anything. Within the first 10 minutes, I see in this video, I'm sliding the bar real fast through it, just skimming, and I see something pop up, and I narrow it down. A red light appeared at the bottom of my bed at my feet, and it didn't zoom off or anything. It just flashed on and flashed off real fast. And it looked exactly like the red light I saw in my bedroom here at the house that shot off and left a light trail. And when I brought it up to my wife, she's like, yeah, it looked just like that video that we took back in the apartment. So 3 times we've seen this in our home, in our bedroom. But the only thing is, it wasn't the same home. We had an apartment and a house that happened in, and I don't know what it is. But
we've had somebody close to the show, First World Problems. That's the name of his YouTube channel. He does paranormal investigations. And he caught one of the most profound red orbs I've ever seen. And we had people in the chat room that were telling us, and you need to look into this yourself, but I believe the red orb is a spirit guide.
Okay.
That's one interpretation of it, you know. But I tell you what, when you've got something like that following you around, that's pretty weird. And I've had an experience with what I think was a shadow entity in the toilet here one time that led me to get a on-air deliverance from Exorcist Bill Bean. That's how much that affected me. So do you find that the paranormal kind of follows you the more you talk about it?
You know, I go back and forth on that. I think that I've always had little weird things happen throughout my life, just odd things that I don't even think about. Like, it doesn't even hit me until it comes up in conversation. But since I started the show, there's been a few things that happened that I think might be a result of what I do. Like, for instance, early on in the show, I was interviewing this one girl, and she was telling her experience that she's been haunted her entire life. She was told it was a tree sprite, which was the first time I've ever heard of a tree sprite. Like, I learn a lot from my audience when they call in and they talk to me.
Same here, dude.
And so she's telling this story, and she talks about this entity, this demonic thing following her around, and how it gets violent at times, and, you know, slams doors and opens doors. And she said at one moment she said to me that normally it acts out when I talk about it because it doesn't like me talking about it. And as soon as she said that to me, in this room, remember how I said earlier in the show I used to do beard reviews? I had piles of boxes against the wall. I'm sitting here, I'm in a dark room, and all of a sudden, as soon as she said that pile of boxes that was sitting there for months just came tumbling down. And I snap my head and I look over and I look at the screen, and her and I are on video together. So I was like, I'm not even going to act like that happened.
Tony, I would have. I really would have, dude. It would have been a messy situation if that had happened to me, man. I'm telling you, because I get so engrossed sometime in the conversations that if something like that happened on the peripheral of me, I think I would freak right out. I really would.
It caught me off guard, but I just wanted to pretend it didn't happen, and I just kind of stored it away in my memory. Another time, this is something that like we haven't even touched on dreams, right? And so I don't know about you, but for me, I don't remember dreams.
I done a show on dreams the other night. This is amazing. Talk about dreams, man. This is so synchronistic.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a personally, I don't like every human being dreams apparently, but I don't remember my dreams. And just like a couple months ago, I actually went through this stretch of like a couple of weeks where I was literally remembering my dreams when I woke up, and I don't know why, but I don't even remember what they were now. But this one time, so when my son was born, he was really bad at sleeping. I mean, really bad sleeper, and he was sleeping next to our bed. And I would wake up at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, get ready for work, and my alarm would wake him up. So I started sleeping downstairs just because I didn't want to wake the kid up that early and stuff and make her day a living hell. And so the very first night I was sleeping on the couch, I'm laying there and I'm sleeping. And in my head, in my dream or whatever it was, something, now I'm in the living room, and right next to the living room is the kitchen. And in the kitchen is a door that goes down to my basement. And in my dream, I hear something thudding up the stairs, bang, 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 coming up the stairs. And the door gets kicked open, flies open, and it comes around the corner into the living room. And it's a humanoid figure, but it's all static. It's all static, like you would see on a TV, like a static, but it's all in the shape of a human. And it's huge, and it's aggressive, and it comes at me. And I wake up, and I jump out of off the couch, and I'm like, ah, like I'm yelling, I'm like, ah, like I was ready to, like I didn't know what to do, but I was just ready to defend myself. And it felt so real. It felt absolutely so real that I couldn't even sleep. And what's crazy about that is I literally had maybe a month or two before that, I had somebody on the show talking about their dreams and having this static figure popping up in their dreams and how it seems to be manifesting into their life. And so I talked to this, and actually that never even was an interview for the show. That actually was an off-air just conversation with somebody that I had. But that experience that they shared with me, I don't know if it was subliminal or what, but I had a very similar experience, and it felt extremely real. And so I don't know, but that was something that also happened as a result of
that almost it's reminiscent of the Slender Man, because the Slender Man starts as a competition, fictional kind of stuff, and then moving from that, and it became so talked about and spoken about on the internet, and almost energized by all the attention it was getting. It started to manifest in our real world.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting phenomena.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it actually shows you the power of the mind.
Yes, indeed.
Like, you can say, oh, well, people are imagining it. They're just making up stories and stuff. When you have two 12-year-old girls kill their friend because the Slender Man to do it, like that's something that on another level, like that's something evil, and it's popping up in reality to the point that two little girls both believe they saw and heard this thing tell them to kill their friend. Like that's not just a wild imagination. And what are the odds of having two mentally sick girls to the point that they're willing to just kill their friend because they wanted to pretend that the Slender Man told them to do it?
We could probably do a full show on this, but we've only got a couple of minutes, and it's on that kind of thought. But how much do you think we ourselves play into the paranormal experience? And I don't mean that it takes away from ghosts or any of the stuff, but almost we energize the situation. We're almost, it needs us there to participate, to almost energize, to manifest. And how much of that are we manifesting ourselves from our subconscious? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a possibility, but I operate under this thought process that I think that we're far more spiritual beings than what we give ourselves credit for. I think that the spiritual world around us is interacting with us because we are spiritual beings. And I think that we have been detached over time from the reality of how much of a spiritual being we are. And so I think the more you tap into that, whether it's through on a spiritual level or just acknowledging the fact that there's more to this life than what I've been told, which is, hey, I'm physical, I'm going to die one day, I'm going to dissolve in the dirt, and that's it. But when you realize that we are physical creature or spiritual creatures inside of a physical body, I think that kind of puts almost a target on your back, because you're drawing attention to yourself, that you're awake, you're woke into the idea that I understand that this physical body is a shell for housing the spiritual man of Tony inside. And I think that the more you look into these things and stuff, the more attention you draw towards yourself. And you can go off on the whole theological stuff as to what certain people believe and stuff, and how that all operates. I mean, if you're talking from a Christian theological perspective, like I kind of come from and stuff, the more you put yourself out there in the spiritual realm as in a positive way, the more the evil entities are going to see that. It's like you're in a dark room, and all of a sudden you're a light and you turn on.
Big time, dude. They're like moths. They're attracted to you. And I tell you what, the old body, biological spacesuit to kick about in this really elaborate simulation that we call life, but we're so much more. And Tony Merkel, I hope this is the first of many conversations. You are awesome, dude. Check out his podcast, The Confessionals. Stay tuned. More to come here on TFRlive.com. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Now, we're still on YouTube, Tony, but let me thank you again, man. And wow. Yeah, and we hardly touched on, like, I've got so many topics here, so we'll definitely get back together again. I suspect we're all going to have a lot of time in our hands for at least the next couple of weeks or months, or who knows how long.
Yeah, I'm laid off of work right now. It was volunteer. Like, I mean, they are asking for drivers to volunteer to lay off, and because my wife's pregnant, I'm trying to avoid her getting sick. And so I said, yeah, I'll take a layoff, and I'm laid off for the next month. But I was just told by some drivers at work yesterday that they're asking more drivers to be laid off like now, because it's just so slow. They're not bringing in like 20 drivers a day because there's just no work. And so I think that I'm a little worried about my job long term, but as long as I have a CDL, I can just find a job. It might mean that I have to drive over the road across country and stuff, which I don't do now. I'm home every day. It's really nice, but I actually drive the same town I live in, so like I'm local every day.
Man. Yeah.
But I mean, if it means I have to drive across the country to keep the house and stuff, I'm gonna have to do what I have to do. And you'll see the studio go mobile at that point. I'll do interviews in my truck when it's turned off. And
I can see that, dude. Videos from the road. I like that. But Tony, honestly, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing what you do. It's always good to hook up with a kindred spirit in the woo. And I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime soon already, brother, okay?
Sure thing.
And let people know again where they find the website. I'll bring it up on the screen here for you. There is a good time. Hatman beard oil. I like that. The Hatman. We didn't even touch on the Hatman. See, so many topics.
Yeah, and my wife actually had Hatman experiences. But yeah, theconfessionalspodcast.com is the website. That's the main hub for everything I do. If you want to be mobile and listen to the show on the go, any podcast playing app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, all those apps have my show, and you can listen to it. And on Thursdays, we put out a member-only show on the website. We're coming out with my own app. The Confessionals Podcast app is coming out in maybe no more than a month from now. We're having designers make it right now. And so members will be able to actually log into their account on the app and listen to member shows through the app itself. Right now, it's only on the website. So, I mean, we're working on a lot of cool stuff. I know it's not a great time to be being an entrepreneur and spending money on things and stuff, but the app's been something I've been working on for months now, and I'm finally getting close to being able to launch it. I'm just so excited about it because I think it's going to put the show on another level.
It's not just that, dude. You're doing what you love doing. I can tell that, like me, you genuinely love these topics. You love these conversations. That's what keeps us coming back for more. And I urge everyone, and I'll be plugging your website as much as I can. It's a really good website, folks. There's articles on there as well. I was reading about stories about the Yowie down in Australia, weird things coming out of the woods, and honestly, you'll be lost on there. So if you like all this stuff, you're going to love his website. Tony, you're absolutely awesome, brother. All the best with the new baby that's on the way. I know we're going through a great time of change right now. I can't think of a better way to distract you, your wife, and the other child you've got. So congrats, brother.
Thank you very much.
And folks, I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have an early stream, and then we'll have Freaky Friday. And as I always do on the way out of the show...
How dare you?
Not you, Greta. No, not Greta. We've got Greta in the drawer. See, everyone loves it when Greta gets played.
How dare you?
And then she gets angry because you laugh at her, because we stole her childhood. It was me and you, Tony. We done it. I know.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the frick.
Oh, and Alex Jones is over here as well. But folks, here we go. We're out of here. Keep your mind open. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo. See, we didn't even talk about black goo either, dude. Wow.